Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the B2B Revenue Leadership Show. Got a great episode today. Going to be talking about anxiety-free selling and how do you manage our personal lives and our professional lives and really grow and focus on the things that really matter the most. Before I get into the interview, I want to make sure that you're checking out b2brevenue.com. I got a free ebook on there on how large companies make product selections. Totally free for you. It's a 20-page real book. It's not a bunch of quotes or a scam. I do not spam you. Also, if your team is either getting stuck with deals in that no decision stage or you're having a hard time getting into meetings, schedule a little call with me. I've got 2 courses out there right now. I'd like to start doing them with teams and not just individuals. You can do it individual if you like, but I'd be happy to fill you in on how it would work for you. It's a nice, natural way. Get your team away from the cold email, the cold calling that is diminishing return. Well, as in most parts of life, once everyone starts doing it, it doesn't seem to work as well. But I've had enormous success with companies in that. Also, a big announcement came out of Discover.org. They now have data sets for the legal industry. If you happen to sell into that industry, they've got a huge data set. You want to check that out. I'd also check out their YouTube channel, Discover.org. They've been doing a lot of great work in video, and we'll be working with them quite a bit. Great blog, great content, and their data set is growing every day. Also, make sure you're checking out Co-Video. Video email is the thing of the future. Look what they're doing. They're really blowing up this year. Video email has been one of my secret weapons in 2018. It's going to be super powerful in 2019. Video in general, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Twitter. It's really a way to engage people. People are busy. Video is much more engaging. Gong proved that deals close more effectively, faster, and more consistently when you just turn the camera on. We're all a little camera shy. I get it. But once you get used to it, it's insanely effective. Let's get into the interview. I'll sum it up at the end. And a big thank you for everybody out there that's connected up with me on LinkedIn and shares my content and tells a friend about the B2B Revenue Show. Here we go. Hey, Joyce, thanks for joining us today as a way of getting started. Tell us about yourself.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me. Well, I am from Atlanta, Georgia, and I am a serial entrepreneur. I started back in '97 with a business that I was standing in a Walmart cleaning supply aisle, frustrated over my budget. So I decided to start a business. Took me a couple weeks to come up with the idea. It became a company name known as Earth Care, which grew from zero at my kitchen table to $125 million traded on NASDAQ. So I did that for quite a while. And then since that time, I've written a book called Millionaire Moms, The Art of Raising a Business and a Family at the Same Time. I enjoy traveling the world and the country, speaking to other salespeople and entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs at corporations about how to maximize your efforts and make awesome things happen that you don't think are possible. Because I was a former stay-at-home mom who became the founder of a publicly traded company. So if that's possible, what's possible for you, right? So I kind of help people dig into what beliefs might be holding them back, as well as teaching them how to sell effectively, because that is, to me, persuasion is the art of business. You got to start with that no matter what you do.
Now, did you just have too much time on your hands to come up with this idea, or were you passionate about it? What was the driver behind it?
Well, that Walmart cleaning supply aisle, I was frustrated with my budget. So we had gone from 2 incomes to 1 income when I became a stay-at-home mom.
Yeah.
And I realized it really wasn't so much, yes, okay, I was frustrated with the budget, but more importantly, I saw the future as I stood there. And I had been raised in a family of 6 kids. My father got laid off. Times got really tough. We didn't have heat in the house for 2 years. Our TV broke for a year. I mean, it was just hand to mouth. And, we were grateful to have a roof over our head and a wonderful city to grow up in. So, we were still blessed, but it was hard. And so when I looked at my child who was with me, he was about 18 months old at the time, kicking in the cart, all of a sudden I saw the future and I didn't like what I was seeing because I was like, dang, if, buying a bottle of Tide is going to cause me grief right now, what about when he needs orthodontics or wants to play travel baseball or whatever? Kids are expensive. So I decided right there and then to change our family's financial destiny by starting my own business. And, by the time I left that Walmart, I was convinced that was the route I needed to go. And I left there. I had no idea what business I was going to start. And so I literally started at ground zero and built from there a $125 million business.
Now, give us a little bit of background on that, because that seems daunting, certainly to me. Where do you start? What did you learn along the way? Why did you get out of it? Or are you out of it? I don't know.
So where I started, I worked my last 2 years of college, worked full-time, went to school full-time at night, and I worked for an environmental company, a garbage company. The owner would build, like he had basically, they're called transfer stations, and then he had built a landfill. And so anyhow, the guy was in the garbage business, and I watched him build and sell. And companies like Waste Management were very active at the time, going around buying small mom and pop businesses to create one large, massive business, and then they would go public. And so I saw it with my own eyes when I was young. I was, 20, 21, 22, somewhere in there. And so I knew the model worked, and it worked not only in garbage, but it worked in LP gas and funeral homes. I mean, there's countless examples of growth through acquisition, and then you go public. So when I decided to start the business, I had set a goal to have $1 million cash in the bank by the time I was 30. I was 28 years old. So obviously that's a great decision to make. Yeah. So I think being naive really, played into my success, and because I truly believed I could do it. Don't ask me why, other than, my faith in God that anything's possible if you just commit to it and you take, of course, massive action to make it happen. So by virtue of setting that goal up front before I knew what I wanted to do, I knew I couldn't be a Mary Kay lady because that would be a slow build, right? So that business was out the window. So it kind of helped create a filter of what opportunities were available to me. And I gave myself a 10-day challenge where I wrote down 3 ideas every day. And by the end of the 10 days, I had 30 really bad ideas.
But it's some excitement.
I was like, darn, but I just wouldn't quit. I was committed to coming up with the idea. And then I went to lunch with my former boss, who I was still friends with. He had been retired for a number of years, and we were friends. And so we're sitting at lunch, and he said, well, what are you doing these days, Joyce? And I said, well, I'm starting a business. And he said, well, what kind of business are you starting? And I said, well, I haven't really decided yet. And then as I looked at him, it was like a light bulb went off over his head, like ding, ding, ding. And I was like, I need to do what you did. I said, I need to build a company through acquisition. I said, because I don't have a company to sell, I need to be the company that buys companies. And he was like, really? And, he had seen it. So he didn't look at me like I was insane. He just asked me questions. He said, well, what kind of business would that be? I'm like, well, the only thing I really know is the environmental field. So what's not been rolled up? And started talking and going back and forth and came up with non-hazardous liquid waste. I know, sexy stuff. So I was like, well, it's liquid garbage and there's no national player. So anyhow, we ended up talking it through, and it was going to be grease traps at restaurants. They have grease traps, in the back of the restaurants in the ground. They also have them in a bin for the yellow grease, which is recycled. The other is disposed of. So that was going to be it. Well, I spent 6 months writing the business plan, investigating, calling people. And I figured out that grease trap companies, the big ones, were like $250,000 a year. And I was like, that's too small. It's not going to get me where I want to go. I need to add to this. And that's when we started adding septic companies and porta potty companies and commercial applications of non-hazardous wastewater. And so I expanded the vision a little, but I stayed in my niche of non-hazardous liquid waste. So as you can imagine, a 28-year-old female in a completely male industry, that didn't bother me at all. I actually looked at it as if it was a superpower and an advantage. So, because they just didn't know what to make of me. These are all older guys in their 40s, 50s, early 60s, and I would go and try to get them to sell their company to me. And at first it was a little hard to get the traction because nobody, like they just would look at me. But eventually I got the first guy to fall, right? And then after that, a second guy. And then ultimately everybody in that industry knew who I was in pretty short order because I was the young woman out buying companies. And so, and how I got the money for that was my old boss became my partner, and, we put in our seed money. He put in more than I put in, and he said, how much money do you have? I'm like, well, I've got $10,000 in savings. And he's like, okay, put it in. I'm like, how much? He's like, all of it. I was like, and then, I ended up having to put more money in ultimately, but it was really $10,000 eventually that, kicked us off. And then I went and got a line of credit from a bank so that we could leverage the money that we had put in. And then I was able to buy my first business, and I did a private placement memorandum. I had no idea what that was. Again, one foot in front of the other, people. When you're starting a new business, you're not going to know what the heck you're doing most of the time. I mean, you'll know some of it, but you won't know all of it. But the important thing is you start moving towards your goal. And so everything you need to know, you will learn on your way. So don't let that stop you. I ended up raising $13 million on the private placement memorandum, bought some more businesses, and used the revenue, that we were buying to kind of help us continue to grow and get more money. And that's kind of how I did it.
So you were able to get the economies of scale by eliminating redundant functionalities between these different companies?
That was actually part of my sales pitch.
Yeah. Okay. That's pretty smart. Yeah, but I have seen this in other industries. I know I was kind of featured on 6 Feet Under in the funeral home space, which was prime for it because everyone's mom and pop.
Yeah, it was perfect.
Yeah, it's like inverse
People
franchising. And are you still involved in that, or?
I'm not. So we moved the company to Texas, and I had a clause in my contract because I wrote myself a contract right up front because I knew there'd be a lot of moving parts. And the deal I had with my husband before I ever started this, because he's just like, you cray girl. He said, hey, whatever you want to do, fine. But I really, we kind of struck a deal before we had kids that our kids wouldn't end up in daycare with other people, just no daycare. So he said, if you can figure out how to get help for the child care piece, then you have my full blessing to do whatever you want to do. So I asked my sister, who is 10 years younger than me and was in college right around like 10 minutes from my house, if she would become my nanny, live at my house. I would pay her good money to, watch my son, and then she could, live here, have a car, go to school, that kind of thing. So she became my babysitter. So in my contract, I said if we moved 50 miles outside of Atlanta, I would get bumped to my highest salary range and ride out my contract. So basically, a golden parachute was in place because of the fact that I had made that commitment to my husband. So for the ladies listening out there, it's daunting as a mom, especially with younger kids, to think I can start a business. But you often think, oh, I'm not going to be able to do it because of my children. Well, that clause was written because of my child, and it ended up making me more money, right? So at that point, I left the company and started staying home again. I have 3 boys now instead of 1, and just went on to do other activities.
And so now you're working on this anxiety-free selling. What's the concept behind that?
Well, I'm sure all your listeners have been to some sort of sales training along the way.
Yep.
Or have had to sell something to someone, whether it's a date with a hot chick or guy. Somewhere along the line, you're selling, right? So I decided, I went to a training and I saw all these people kind of freaking out because they would make you actually do prospecting, like, okay, go for it. And everybody's beliefs were bubbling up as to why they couldn't pick up the phone or why they couldn't knock on a door. And I was like, wow, there's a lot of head trash around selling, which I've always loved. It's always just kind of been my thing. And I thought I would like to help people become master salespeople. And the first thing is to feel good about it. So that's why I came up with anxiety-free selling, is to not only teach people how to sell more better, but to do it from a peaceful place where you're proud and you're happy and you know you're helping people. So how to, because sometimes it's physical, like you're kind of freaking out, right? The nerves are going, everything. So I have all these different ways to help people learn to manage the physical and the mental space of selling. And, I've done, after Earth Care, I went on to get in a product into Walmart from a cold start and got a national deal. And that was a really cool moment for me because it was like a full circle moment, because I had gone from standing in a Walmart frustrated to selling products into Walmart for consumer goods products. And then I also got a deal with the Atlanta Braves Stadium before SunTrust. We just got a new stadium. But I got a deal with them. I didn't have an appointment. And I talked my way past the guards, drove to the guy's office, and walked in there and sat in his office until he would give me 5 minutes. And I ended up walking out of there with a contract 2.5 hours later. So, there are ways to sell that will work in your favor. And that's what I like to teach people.
And does that come natural to you, or how did you acquire that skill?
I think it came naturally to me because I look back, I never was planning to be an entrepreneur. I was happy working for the company I was working for. But my first entrepreneurial experience was when I was 5 years old. I was goofing around, walking around, because you could do that back then without your mom with you all the time. But I came across this field of frogs. It was like this lot that was like all these frogs. And I was like, this is crazy. So I went and got a shoebox and I scooped up these frogs and I went door to door and I rang the doorbell and I sold them to the neighbors. And I said, would you like to buy a frog? They're very good for your garden. It's a dime for the little ones and a quarter for the big ones. And so I sold out of my frogs, like, toot sweet, really fast. And that was my first sales experience. And then the only other time I'd really sold was in high school. I was in Latin class, which I sucked at. And the Latin teacher's like, well, you got to sell donuts. Everybody's got to go sell donuts. Krispy Kreme donuts. And I thought it would help my grade if I sold some donuts. So I went and I sold 60 boxes. And I come back to class and Mr. Folds, Roswell High School, reads out everybody's results. He's like, George, 0. Kathy, 0. Susan, 2. Joyce, 60. Way to go, Joyce. I was like so embarrassed. I just wanted to die. And I had to get 60 Krispy Kreme boxes of donuts home. And normally I would ride in the car, but for some reason I ended up on the bus that day. And I'm telling you, it was like keeping the kids off the boxes of donuts so I could deliver them with something else. But so from those two experiences, I think I was just naturally, willing to stick my neck out. I guess that's the theme, is I don't mind doing scary stuff because it's kind of exciting. If you just turn your fear into excitement, you just reframe that in your mind. I mean, it's awesome. There's nothing more transparent than selling. And when you learn certain techniques, like everybody knows the next one who talks loses, right? So you put it out there and you shut your mouth. and people get really quiet and it can be really uncomfortable. And instead of being like, oh my God, I got to talk, I think 1,000, 2,000. I'm thinking of all the money that 5 or 10 seconds of silence is making me. And where else in life can you make, 10,000, 100,000, whatever the negotiation is, in cash by keeping your mouth shut for 10 seconds. So it's all about how you frame things. And I guess I've always been good at being optimistic and always seeing the bright side.
So how do you take people, especially, the stay-at-home moms, all this distraction, responsibility, guilt, pressure, and help them kind of get over, say they're not naturals, say that they're introverts, shy even, but they do want to become entrepreneurs. They do want to, increase their economic standing in life for themselves and their children. How do you get them on that journey?
Well, first of all, introverts often make the best salespeople. So they're able to listen more and talk less than an extrovert. So that can actually be a superpower if you choose to use it that way. So how I would suggest they get started is, one, always look at what you're naturally good at, right? So when I was starting my business, the 30 terrible ideas I had, I realized I don't have any experience in this or any real passion for it. And, this is not going to serve me. So I thought, well, what do I know? And that's when I thought, I know the environmental business. But to start, everything I try to center myself first. And I believe mightily in meditation. So meditation to me is, how people pray for things. Meditation is listening to what the universe has in store for you. So if you can learn how to meditate, 15 minutes a day, all of a sudden things will drop into your mind as you're going about your day. I mean, it just happened to me right before this podcast. I had this specific question. It was bothering me and I wanted to know what to do and I didn't know what to do. And all of a sudden the answer just popped into my head as I was walking in from the gym. So I believe that comes from meditating, honestly. It's quieting your brain, being quiet, and then allowing the answers to come to you when they come. So, and then after that, you got to get buy-in. Just like I asked my husband, are you okay with me starting a business? And he said, yes, with these caveats. And so I honored the commitment to him and what would make him feel solid. And so have those conversations with those in your, those important people in your life that you need to talk to make sure that you're not creating resistance or stress that's not necessary. And the same with your kids. I remember I was a PTA mom, right? I was a class mom. I was so involved with my kid's life. When he graduated 5th grade, I was like, weren't you so glad I was your room mom every single year from kindergarten to 5th grade? He went, eh. I was like, what? Because I didn't like being room mom, if I'm being 100% honest. Kids are, for some reason, kids love me, but I'm like, yeah, you're all right, kid. So anyhow, I said, that was a real eye-opener for me. So I said, well, what do I do that's important to you, that you appreciate and like? And he said, do you remember that time I had a baseball game an hour away from the house and I wore the wrong pants and you drove them out in traffic to me so I wouldn't be embarrassed wearing the wrong color pants? He goes, that I really appreciated. So that was a real an eye-opener to me. So then I asked my other 2 sons the same question, and they gave me their answers. And from that point on, I learned, you know what? I need to stop all these shoulds. Like, you should be the room mom. You should be this. You should be that. And just start delivering on what's important to the important people in my life. And that's what I would suggest to the moms. And then other than that, it's time to start learning, baby. You got to figure out what it is that drives you and makes you excited and start investigating it and start gaining the knowledge through podcasts like this on how to actually make things happen. And that's for women and for men. So it's part, due diligence is the fancy word for it, but it's just about researching and investigating what you're interested in getting into. And remember, you will learn what you need to learn as you go. But, and never forget to think about money. That's the other thing. A lot of times people get passionate about whatever they're passionate about. Do you think I was passionate about the poo-poo business? I was not. But what I was passionate about was the fact that I was changing my family's financial destiny. I was giving an exit strategy to business owners who had worked 30, 40 years of their life building a business and giving them a solid exit. I was excited about the employees that I was going to be bringing a fantastic culture to and providing jobs. I had 350 employees. I mean, that was all exciting. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the thing. It's, looking for the excitement around it. So that the important thing is you figure out how you're going to make money right up front, not, just keep throwing stuff, hoping.
And that's it. And too many people are like looking to become lifestyle entrepreneurs and Instagram models and, that type of idea that's glamorous, but not lucrative.
I think you just nailed it. Glamour doesn't generally not pay unless you're the Kardashians. I went into the least sexy business I could find, and it pays. So remember, look for the stuff that nobody's interested in. The boring day-to-day stuff is, makes money. We all, the funeral home, everybody dies. The garbage business, everybody has garbage. Everybody sells houses. I mean, it's just like certain things in life are a definite go. So just kind of, take some time and become introspective and do some research to see what fits. And if you do have a dream, go ahead and follow it, because it wouldn't be in your mind if it wasn't for you. Brian's dream is different from Joyce's dream. So, you have your dream because that's what was intended for you to have. And everybody has that purpose in their life.
Excellent. Hey, Joyce, I really enjoyed this conversation. For the people who want to learn more about your work, get to know you and connect with you, where do they go?
Go to joyceboone.com and you can access my 90-day sprint, which is what I use to get my goals accomplished in short order. That's complimentary there, as well as my podcast, Anxiety-Free Selling. I also have a private Facebook group called Anxiety-Free Selling, and you can access that on facebook.groups/Joyce Boone. And I would so love to hear from your listeners. So thank you for having me today.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed talking to Joyce. That story is pretty compelling. And, I don't know how people do it with kids. I don't have any kids. And when I see how much work they are and how important it is to raise them right, and that balance, I wish I had it. I had 2 cats and I found them overwhelming. But I'm kind of a 100% focused guy on one thing, and that's selling. Love selling. Also, got a webinar coming up with some folks coming up, I think, on the 18th of December. Look for that. I'll be announcing it on LinkedIn. We're going to be talking about marketing mistakes, the 5 things that we see happening today. And although my career has been pretty much, I'd say 80% sales only, I've always been at early stage startups where we required salespeople to work tightly with marketing, as well as being an entrepreneur and an investor in a B2C business where I became one of the early users of Google AdWords and applying that to the business, which blew up in the good way, not the bad way. But for the last 6 years, I've been pretty much a content marketer with the podcast, YouTube, LinkedIn, social stuff. And I've learned a lot through that. And you learn a lot when it's your money. I'll tell you, it's very different spending your money than somebody else's. And I'll share the lessons I've learned from that, as well as the lessons from the 50 CMOs that I've interviewed about what's working today in B2B marketing. Look for that. Arkadin is the sponsor of it. So you can go to arkadin.com, look for it there, or just watch my LinkedIn page. I'll be announcing it probably again next weekend. It's going to be a great conversation. I hope you'll get a lot out of it. I'm going to pretty much share a strategy that I've put together that's been pretty effective on a very small, relatively small team and budget. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.